Welcome back, everyone, to the Sustainably Tidy podcast, where I help you get organized in a way that is sustainable for both you and the planet. Thank you for tuning in. I'm your host, Alexa, and to start off our episodes, we are kicking off with sustainable swaps, which are exactly what they sound like: easy swaps that you can bring into your life that are more sustainable than their traditional alternatives. And these are items that have historically worked well for me. I am not sponsored by anything. I am truly just sharing ways that I have incorporated more sustainable alternatives into my everyday life in hopes that it may spark some ideas for you. So today we're talking about Blue Land's foaming hand wash. And this is, if you're watching on YouTube, the bottle that I purchased probably 2 years ago now, and it sits on my counter. It's the hand wash that I use. You can see it is basically empty because I use it. And this is intended to be more sustainable because you purchase this bottle, and then when you run out of soap, you purchase one of these tablets, which essentially has a concentrate for the soap. When you run out of soap, you drop the tablet into the glass canister, and then you fill the canister up with water and let the tablet dissolve, and bam, you have your foaming soap. This is more sustainable than our traditional plastic packaging for soap because this is a bottle you can reuse. And so anytime you run out, you are not throwing away a plastic package. You also are not going out and purchasing a new plastic package of soap. There are multiple brands now that have something similar to what Blue Land has. I used Blue Land because it was one of the first I was able to find, and I think they've been able to really spur a lot of other groups coming onto the market with these types of products. You can buy the Blue Land soap at the Container Store. That's usually where I purchase it from, but I actually saw it at a Target near me recently. So you could also get it there or on their website. So fairly easily accessible. I think that's been the really cool thing to see over the years is more sustainable items coming online that are easier to get your hands on rather than before where I felt like you had to purchase everything online and wait for shipping, and that's a whole thing. So that's a sustainable swap that hopefully inspires you to think about a sustainable swap that you could bring into your home. Now, for today's episode, we are going to discuss some of the common pitfalls that I see with decluttering. The decluttering process really will determine how successful you are with getting organized and staying organized. It is the hardest part of the process, but the most important part of the process by far. I really wanted to share some of the common pitfalls that I see with decluttering because I imagine that as you guys are going through the decluttering process, you're probably experiencing some of the same hiccups. And the easier and quicker it is for you to get over these hiccups, the easier it'll be for you to get organized. The first common pitfall that I see when people are going through the decluttering process is, oh my gosh, I can't get rid of this. I'm going to miss it later. And what I would say to that, there's a few things that I usually tell people that I'm working with if I hear that sort of rationale as to why we should keep something. The first is that no one has ever called me. Not one of my clients, not one, ever, has ever called me and said, oh my gosh, Alexa, I can't believe we got rid of XYZ item. We never should have gotten rid of it. I keep thinking about it. Now I really need it. No one's ever called me and said that. Instead, what I would say like 60 to 70% of my clients have called me and said after we got organized is I should have let you get rid of more stuff. So the exact opposite of what we often think is going to happen actually happens. Instead of thinking we're going to miss a bunch of items and we need them and we're going to be upset when they're gone, people are actually like, oh my gosh, I should have gotten rid of more. And I like to tell people that because I think it helps break through that mental block of, I need to keep this. If I don't keep this, I'm going to miss it later. Something will be missing from my life. I promise you, if you push yourself to just get rid of the item, I'm almost confident you will actually not miss it later. because if it was something we were going to miss later, it would probably be in our needs pile. Last episode, I talked about the different piles I'll have clients put things in as we're decluttering. You start with the things that you need, you love, you absolutely must keep. There's another pile of items that we know we can get rid of, easy no's, easy get rid ofs. And then there's the maybe pile. So when I'm talking to clients, usually this rationale, this scaredness of if I get rid of it, I will miss it later is really pertaining to items in that maybe pile. If it's in the maybe pile, chances are we don't actually need it, and chances are we're not going to miss it later. So if it's something that you're scared you're going to miss later, try to remember, in the event that you do actually miss it and find that you needed it, this is going to depend on the person, but I usually have a conversation about how much it would cost to replace it. So let's say that the item would cost $20 to replace. I would ask my client if they feel they have the ability to replace that item if it does turn out that they need it and really do miss it. Usually the items we're talking about are of fairly little value. If we have to replace them, I've found that usually my clients have the means to replace them if needed. Not that I'm encouraging people to just go out and purchase anything that we get rid of that would defeat the purpose of getting organized, but be practical with yourself. If you find that you need it later on, you may have the means to replace it fairly easily. The third thing I'll do, usually if none of those other options worked, is I'll have my client put this item on a probationary period. We'll put it in a box. We'll put it somewhere that's out of sight, out of mind. And if they actually go back to find that item or find that they need to use that item within the next month or 2 months or whatever time period we set, you keep it. But if not, we get rid of it after a month or 2 months. So that's another way to try to actually prove out that theory of whether or not you will miss an item or need an item is put it away, see if you actually go back to it. And if you don't, after a set amount of time, get rid of it. The second thing that I'll hear a lot from clients is, I will return this item. I don't want to get rid of it because I'm going to return it. And I am all for returning items to their senders, 100%. I also know that a lot of times we have piles of returns dating back to 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, sometimes a year, sometimes longer than that. And so now our items actually can't be returned because it has gone past the return period. If you find that you are one of those people that has a lot of items that you needed to return that never got returned, and so now you're kind of stuck with them, be honest with yourself. Let's just donate the item now, because you're probably not going to return it, and that's okay. And I know that sometimes it's an item that may have cost you a lot of money. If so, let's actually return it. Let's set a date to make those returns. And that's usually what I'll do with clients is I'll say, okay, the next time I come back is in 2 weeks. Anything that's not returned within the next 2 weeks, we're going to donate. But you need to set a deadline for yourself, because all too often what I see is that returns pile up in a room or a closet somewhere and they don't actually get returned. And so even though we've gone through the hard work of decluttering space, it's still filled with stuff that we don't actually intend to use because we're going to return it, but we don't actually return it. So be realistic with yourself about the returns. If you're going to return it, great. Set a date, stick to it, or be honest with yourself and donate it. Along the same lines, I hear a lot of, well, I'm going to sell this item at a garage sale that I'm going to host soon. If you're going to have that garage sale, great. I think garage sales are great ways to get items reused and repurposed. So it's a way of being more sustainable. So garage sales are great. But I think you know where I'm going with this. A lot of times we don't actually have that garage sale. So there's a lot of items sitting in our garage that are not sold and that are just waiting for that day that the garage sale comes. And so again, we have a bunch of items in our space that sit for months, sometimes years, without actually leaving our space. So they're just creating clutter because we have this idea that we're going to do a garage sale that we're actually not going to do. Again, we have to be honest with ourselves. A lot of times by the time a client calls me, they're fed up with the way that their space looks, the way that it feels, and they want change, and they want change quickly. The quickest way to create the change in your space that you want is to get rid of the items now. If I have a client who is really dedicated to having that garage sale, I'll do the same thing. I'll say, okay, what date are we having the garage sale? Let's put it on the calendar. And if I come back and the garage sale hasn't happened, then we're just going to get rid of the items. We need to set deadlines for ourselves. Otherwise, we're busy. It's just not going to happen. And that's okay if it doesn't happen. But if you're going to keep an item for the purposes of selling it later, make sure that you actually do sell it later, or just go ahead and get rid of the item now. Now, another thing that I see holding people back when it comes to the decluttering process is not setting proper boundaries. So I've talked about this a little bit before, but it's important that we work within the confines of our space. A lot of times we're told we can just keep consuming, keep purchasing, keeping things in our home, and there's no real consequence. But everything has a maximum capacity. And anytime we're filling our spaces with more than what that maximum capacity is, we're going to have a cluttered space. And so you really have to identify what are the boundaries of the space that I currently have. If it's a closet with space for 20 pairs of shoes, set the boundary of only keeping 20 pairs of shoes. If it's a kitchen with the space for 3 pots and pans, set the boundary of 3 pots and pans. We have to set boundaries of our space and adhere to them. Otherwise, we're going to have clutter. And sometimes that can feel unfair for people with smaller spaces who might say, well, my space is smaller. I would like to be able to keep more than what my space really can hold. And what I would say to that is, I understand, but if you want a space that feels peaceful, that feels serene, that you don't feel as cluttered, you have to adhere to the boundaries of your space. You just simply have to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to get the results that you want. Now, for people with smaller spaces, you can repurpose different areas. So if you live in a really small apartment in New York City and you don't have a ton of closet space, that's an area where I would work with a client to try to identify other spaces in the home that make sense for clothing storage. This is something that I don't ever do with clients who have full homes with relatively regular sized bedrooms, bathrooms, closets. I'm really only doing that in those special case scenarios where people really do have quite a tiny footprint of space to work with. So that's about setting boundaries within your space. But one of the things that I see a lot with clients is that they tend to get a lot of items from other people. And it's always from a good place, a show of love, a show of, I'm thinking of you, I want to give you something. But in order to stay organized and reduce the amount of clutter in our homes, we also have to set boundaries with our loved ones. I cannot tell you how many times I've had conversations with clients about the challenges of accepting stuff from the people we love. So if you're like me, you have a family member who loves to give you stuff. Free stuff, trinkets, random items that they find online when they think of you, random things from their home that they want to give you as a sign of love, or just offloading things onto you. And for me, that was my lovely, amazing, beautiful grandmother. She loves to gift me with things. And when I decided to live a more minimalist lifestyle, I had to have a conversation with her that was basically like, Grammy, I love you. Love that you think of me to purchase things and gift me things. But I really actually am trying to purchase and consume and accumulate less stuff. And so I can tell you a few of the items that I do want to accumulate and that I do have on my list to purchase. And if you ever feel so compelled to help me purchase those items or give me those items, I will gladly accept them. But I would just prefer you give me a call when you think of me and we can talk and we can have a nice conversation. But don't worry about buying me that thing. Instead, just call me or text me and we can talk. Now, my grandmother is pretty chill. She's cool. She understood and she was fine with it. And you have to think about who that person is in your life who tends to push things into your home, and you will know how best to address a conversation with them. But we do have to set boundaries with those that we love. If we are trying to accumulate less, have less clutter, we have to let people know that that's something that we're trying to do. Otherwise, they'll keep doing the same loving gestures that they are doing out of a place of love for us. And it's not about, rejecting their love or rejecting the things that they're trying to do in our lives, but we just ask that it comes in a different way that doesn't result in us having an additional possession in our house. I think people can be, I've found, more understanding about that than maybe we think that they will be. And so I tend to encourage my clients to have those conversations with the people in their lives that they love about the lifestyle change they're trying to make. And I think you'll also be surprised that it could spark a conversation about possessions and stuff that we typically don't have. I know with my own grandmother, I actually ended up decluttering her house before she moved and helped her get rid of a ton of stuff because she recognized that she was really accumulating a lot of things, a lot of possessions, a lot of items. And so she actually appreciated the fact that I was trying to not do that because she saw the negative impact it had had on her life, her accumulating stuff over time. So it can actually spark conversation, and people may be struggling with the same thing that you are, and you deciding you're not going to accumulate more stuff, have more clutter, can be inspiring to other people as well. So I would encourage you to have those conversations because they are important to have and can go further than you may imagine. So those are some of the pitfalls I see and how I try to help my clients navigate them. Hopefully those tips helped you as well. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time on the Sustainably Tidy podcast.